We're about to hear from two remarkable mothers, each carrying the weight of an unimaginable loss. Their sons' lives were cut tragically short under different circumstances, but the pain they've endured and the darkness they've navigated binds their stories together. Through the depths of grief, they found a way to light a path for others, turning their sorrow into a force for change. AnneMoss, our next speaker, turned her profound grief into a crusade for mental health and suicide prevention after losing her son, Charles. Her work not only breaks the silence around suicide and addiction, but offers hope and guidance to prevent such devastation in other families. AnneMoss shares her emotionally naked stories because she knows many of us are not living in lollipop land with shiny faces and perfect families. I can't say that strongly enough. Please join me in welcoming AnneMoss, a courageous mother and advocate, sharing her path of pain, resilience, and hope.
So I wanted to share the crisis text line is 741-741, and the suicide and prevention lifeline is 988. And I will confess this time of night, I only have one vocal cord. I'm a brain tumor survivor. So sometimes it wavers, comes in and out, but hopefully you can hear me. It's 2014. I'm standing on the football field. And I'm standing right next to my older son, Richard. And he's a senior that year, and he's on homecoming court. And I look back and I see my other son, who's a sophomore, funniest, most popular kid in school, being escorted by his favorite teacher, Miss Fretwell. And he's laughing and he's making her laugh, because that's what Charles did. Picture my boy, a really big one. And so we're standing there, he's, laughing. And I think to everybody who was looking down at us that day, they thought, man, she's got it made. They have a perfect family. And I will tell you, that day was a proud mama moment. I loved it. But we weren't a perfect family. Our family was actually in chaos. And because Charles's drug use had started to escalate, and what I didn't know is that he was using drugs and alcohol to numb thoughts of suicide. And who would have thought the funniest, most popular kid in school, the kid that made everybody laugh, he was smart, had everything going for him, would be struggling with suicide? Now, I didn't know any of this. All I knew was about the drug use. So his drug use would escalate, and we had to take some really difficult steps. And so he went to Wilderness, and he ended up going to therapeutic boarding school. That's not plan A, right? And today I can't even tell you whether that was the right move. I certainly didn't have the money to do that, but our home equity loan did. And he would come back in 2014, having spent some 22 months outside our home in some kind of placement. And what I didn't know is right when he got back home, he became addicted to heroin. I didn't know it. He did it at night, and that's when I was sleeping. So, of course, I didn't know. I noticed some odd things. He would go to detox. He'd go to rehab. And on June 5th, 2015, the police call. I'm in the back of the police car, my husband's in front, and they deliver the worst news of our lives. And they tell us our son has been found dead. And my husband says, well, how did he die? And I'm thinking, what's a crazy question? How do you think he died? And the policeman says it was a suicide, and the method left no question. My first thought was, how could I be such a crummy mother that my child would leave me that way? But it wasn't about me. My son struggled with unimaginable pain and the physical pain and withdrawal when he took his own life. I didn't understand why suicide, and it would be a long time before I would. I didn't think this would happen to us. I survived a broken neck during a diving accident. I escaped an attack at knife point that was attempted rape and murder when I was 18. I told you earlier I was a brain tumor survivor. I thought nothing else can happen to me because, I got all this insurance. I've already invested in all this terrible stuff. But life doesn't work that way. I did not think I could survive after he died. And I remember curling up on the floor right after it happened, not wanting to wake up the next day, not wanting to kill myself. I'll be honest. I just didn't want to wake up the next day and face all of it. I didn't know what all this looked like. So the first thing I told myself is, as hard as it is right now, and it was brutal, it will never hurt that much again. You've already gotten the news. You'll never get that news again. And that's what got me from 1 hour to the next. So I want to help you understand a process of basically post-traumatic growth. Now, that's a buzzword, right? And I don't love it. There is one word in there I do love, and it's growth. And through our experiences, we have the opportunity for growth. But we know the story, right? You go through tragedy, and then the next thing you know, you emerge a new person and you're Superman. That's not how it happens. You curl up on the floor for 3 years and you cry your eyes out. You don't want to move forward. You don't want to get out of bed, but you do anyway. And you do that day after day. And every time you're curled up in a ball, you let those feelings in because we have to feel our feelings. You must feel your feelings. If you avoid it, you will stay in that raw, ugly place much longer. If you numb it with drugs and alcohol, eat too much ice cream, all of that will delay your progress because pain is the emotional building blocks to healing. Now, I say healing, it's not really like there's an end point where I've reached a day where healed. I will grieve my son the rest of my life. But I have reached a place where I've integrated the loss into my life, and I have developed a relationship with my beloved dad. Now, if you'd asked me a few years ago, before all this happened, if it was possible to have a relationship with somebody who was dead, I'd have told you you were crazy. But I actually treasure that relationship. I was talking to him right before the series started because we chat. And thank goodness for earbuds, because otherwise it would look like I was talking to the air. So that feel your feelings thing, I'm going to let you in on a secret. You'll start to feel them come on. First thing, your instinct is, whoo, I don't want to do that. Go towards it, let them in, sit with those difficult feelings. The really, really, really intense ones, the ones that take you to your knees, have you curled in a ball, kicking the wall, screaming and crying. Do you know how long they last? 60 to 90 seconds. You can do that. While you are in that state, you do not give yourself grief. You do not punish yourself. You say things like, I'm doing the best I can. I'm letting this in. I'm feeling this way because I loved so much. Or yes, I've failed, but I'm going to learn from that. That's what that moment is about. And then we'll feel it lift because all feelings are temporary. And when it lifts, that's when you go distract yourself. And I usually do something like this. You've seen dogs do this. because it signals an end to one emotional state and the beginning of another for me. So, what are your healthy coping strategies? And you need to develop a toolbox of more than one. And here's why. I speak a lot at universities. So, when I ask anybody at a university, the guys will speak up and they'll say, "What's your coping strategy?" Guess what they say? Sex. I'm like, "Okay, what else?" And they stare at me like there can't possibly be anything else other than sex. So then I give them an example. You're at Kroger in the frozen food section. All of a sudden, you get a panic attack. Is that a good time to have sex? And they look up like, "Oh, yeah, I might need another one." I've had some people, there's journaling, there's running, there's walking. I was a runner. I'm now a walker. Beekeeping is one that somebody told me about. And then another one was reading fart jokes. Now, the way you figure out is if it's a healthy coping strategy or not a healthy coping strategy. You think, will long-term use of this help me or hurt me? Now, if it's a bottle of wine, well, eventually you could become addicted or dependent, or at least emotionally dependent, and probably gain weight that you don't want. If it's reading fart jokes, hey, that's fine. If it's writing, maybe you end up with a book. So think about what your coping strategies are and start building that toolbox. Number 2, I want you to find support for yourself. A lot of people think, "Oh no, I can do this alone." But we're human beings. We're not meant to do this alone. We're meant to congregate, be together, and connect. So let's say you feel like you're burdening someone else when you talk to them. Do you know when you put your trust into somebody else, you're telling them you're worthy. I trust you. That makes that person feel really good. You're helping them and you're deepening connections and relationships. So you're not burdening someone else. You're actually deepening a relationship. However, not everybody can sit with you in your tragedy, right? Because there's some people that as soon as you say, "Oh, I feel so depressed," and they go, "Oh, you should exercise more." That's not the type of person you want to tell. You want to tell the person who's going to listen. So you want to tell that trusted friend. You want to tell that trusted relative. Maybe it's a group. Maybe it's a support group. Maybe it's your old sorority or fraternity. It could be any group, any person that you feel a connection with. Finally, I want you all to listen. Listening to somebody else is really the greatest gift you can offer another human being. Because you want another person to feel heard. You want to feel heard, right? When you're upset about, let's say you're getting a divorce, and somebody says, "Oh, you'll find someone else." That's not what you want to hear in that moment, right? You don't want to hear somebody fixing it. You just want to be heard. And sometimes when we say, "Tell me more," what we need to do on the other end of that is shut up, be quiet, allow for those long pauses and stretches because the other person is processing. There's a lot of beautiful things that happen in that moment of silence if you let it happen. It's funny that it took me decades to learn a lot of these lessons. And when I wrote my first book, Diary of a Broken Mind, I used a lot of my son's lyrics. And kind of ironic, I realized, he kind of knew all this stuff that I was learning as I was writing the book. And as funny and as talented as my son was, you know what his greatest gift was? Listening and letting other people know that they matter. And that is the legacy that I am carrying forward in my son's name, Charles Aubrey Rogers. Thank you all.
Thank you, AnneMoss, for sharing your heart with us and for sharing meaningful strategies that we can use in our own lives when things get hard, because they always do.